80% of sales requires at least 5 follow-ups in order to close that deal. And over 40% of businesses give up after just one try.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Behind Their Success podcast. I am Peyton Squires, the host, and today we have on Jason Kramer. Jason is the founder and CEO of Cultivize, a consulting firm specializing in lead nurturing and CRM implementation. With over 20 years of experience, Jason has worked with global and local brands to help bridge the gap between marketing and sales. Jason, good morning. Welcome on the podcast.
Good morning. Happy to be here. Excited to be here, I should say.
Yeah, absolutely, Jason. So, got to know you a little bit here before we jumped on recording. Kind of give us a little bit about your background and what you do in business.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a New Yorker through and through, but my background started in graphic design and marketing. Started my own boutique marketing and web development shop in 2002. And I ran that business for 16 years. And it really became one of those things where I was good at something and I decided, okay, instead of working for somebody, kind of like your story, let me try to kind of throw my shingle out there. Nothing about sales, nothing about really running a business, and decided to give it a shot. And so for 16 years, I built that business and ran it. And then really the story, which we'll talk about today, is why I wound up selling that business and then starting Cultivize about 6 years ago. And the light bulb there, which we'll get into, is two factors. One, I saw two cycles that kept happening that were sort of troublesome to me, and I knew that there was a solution for it. And one was companies spending money on marketing and lead gen, or networking groups, doing advertising online, whatever they're doing. They're not able to really track the true ROI if it's actually really working and bringing in not only leads, but quality leads and revenue. And then the other factor is you spend all this time getting these leads and spending money, spending time, but that we found that, and this to me is just an industry fact, 80% of sales requires at least 5 follow-ups in order to close that deal. And over 40% of businesses give up after just one try. And so that's why I started Cultivize, to kind of help businesses solve those two gaps.
Yeah, totally understand that, right? I've seen stats or whatnot, on like salespeople, and like it's a massive percentage of salespeople that never even ask for like the close one time, let alone like 4 times. Right?
Yeah.
So I mean, businesses just need a whole lot more processes built around a lot.
Absolutely. I mean, I always kind of like give the visual where it's like, you could have an amazing contractor come to your house and build you the house, but if he shows up with a hammer and 5 nails, he's not really going to get very far. So, there's companies out there, just independent salespeople, that are not really being equipped with the right tools to make them successful. And so they're struggling. They might eventually get there, but they're not going to get there as efficiently and as rewarding for both themselves and the business if they don't have the right tools to help them do that.
Yeah. And it's kind of interesting, the more and more, learning about business and speaking to different entrepreneurs, how the conflict can be there between sales and marketing, right? Like marketing's like, hey, sales isn't filling up with the leads. And then sales is like, hey, these leads suck. And then they just kind of blame each other for the part. Can you kind of like speak to that a little bit, or what you've seen in something like that?
So it's a huge, for not every business, but for a lot of businesses, a big problem, partly because of what you just explained, right? There was no communication. And so marketing be like, come up with some crazy, awesome idea in their mind about how we're going to promote this product, this service. We're going to do this amazing campaign, but they don't get the input from sales, right? So they don't say, hey, sales, what's the biggest problems when you talk to customers that they have? What are the typical solutions that you're talking about? What seems to be their emotional sort of buy-in? And so they feel neglected, the sales team, to say, hey, like, we're the ones actually talking to the customers. Like, you, the marketing folks, are just, let's say that they're not doing their job, but they're doing it a little bit blindsided, right? They don't see the whole picture.
So they're not talking to the market, right?
Exactly. And so sometimes that's a factor, and the way to do that is obviously just simple, right? Get people to talk, and ego and all these other things, and just say, hey, we're here for the greater good to grow this business and to sell things. And so to better do that, we need to really work collaboratively as a team. But I think that, once you have that in place, Peyton, the other thing you really need to have is some type of CRM system where you could connect the marketing efforts, meaning your inbound stuff, right? Your social media, your AdWords, the trade shows you're going to, anything you're doing, direct mail, all that could funnel into your CRM in a way where you know exactly where those leads are coming from. But then the sales team is also using the exact same CRM to do what they do. And now you have everybody's listening. They don't see me putting my hands together, but now you're bridging the gap, putting everything together so that you can actually see very concurrently, okay, this is generating a lot of leads, but it's really like generating high quality leads. And it's not the fault of the sales team because the sales team is saying, hey, we're calling these people. The phone number is bad. The email address is bad. They're not returning a call. We don't even get one conversation with them. So clearly there's something going on with the marketing side with the targeting, and it's not really working. And so those are the two fundamental things that we know for sure can make a big impact.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, all of that, all of that you talk through sales and marketing and everything you talked about there, it's like, it's just taking all of that to a higher level of intentionality and a higher level of, I don't know, just professionalism, right? It's like, hey, if we want to grow this bigger and better business, we got to implement all these processes, right? And implement all this structure that it's going to allow us to do this efficiently and not. And entrepreneurs in their first few years or whatever, you hear people talking about stuff, even in this, granular and detail of all this stuff we need to track, like it, can kind of blow their minds.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's a great point is that while this might sound very technical, I think kind of starting just at the basic level, for your audience, my definition, because I'm in the world of CRM, people are like, well, what is that? Right. They're like, oh, I have MailChimp. That's a CRM. That's not a CRM. Right. And so to me, a definition of a CRM is that it's going to be a place to store your leads, your current customers, past customers, even potentially vendors and strategic partners in an organized way that's segmentable. So you could actually find those people and be able to communicate to them with different messaging. The second part is it's going to have an outbound email marketing component built in. So you could actually see what is happening with the leads that are in the CRM, who's opening up emails, who's visiting the website. So there's website tracking in there. So there's a way to build almost like this history, if you will, visualize like a timeline of events. What is that person doing? And the third piece that's critical is sales functionality, right? Having a pipeline to manage your dashboard, having a place for tasks to exist for the sales team to follow up with people, having reporting to know, okay, how long does it take to win business, to lose the business? Where are we at? What's our projected revenue? If you don't have those three components, you really don't have a true CRM. Now, the thing I'll add to that, because I know there's different size businesses listening today, you might have like an ERP system. Like if you're a bigger company, you might have a Salesforce or like a NetSuite. If you're a smaller company, you might be using like Google Sheets, or you might be using Pipedrive or something like that. Or you might even having a quoting tool like QuickBooks, right? To do quotes. And then you might be using like MailChimp to do your email marketing. You might be using like Calendly to book your calls. And so you have like all these different technology, but nothing's talking together. And
Yeah.
so it's not to say that you can't use those different pieces of technology, but there are ways to bridge the gap and put them together in a efficient way to make that data more effective. And not only that, Peyton, another thing too, which your audience might kind of, a trigger might go off as I say this. When we talk to prospective clients, we ask them to outline, what does a typical day look like when you're dealing with like your sales and your marketing? And we sort of roadmap that and just write it down on a paper, if you will. And what we find is a lot of people are spending a lot of time doing double data entry. They're exporting things from one place, importing to another place. And next thing you know, you're spending 5, 10, 15 hours a week manually doing things that could be automated. And now
Yeah.
you can free up that person to do more important things for your business
Actually sales, right?
and something else, right? Than just kind of pushing paper, if you will. So it's not only about making your sales process more efficient, it's about making the business more efficient as well.
Yeah. I've gone through a lot of this type of stuff, and we've done a lot of like CRM work and stuff internally. It can just be, it can be a bit overwhelming trying to think through all that and all the different tools. There's like unlimited tools out there. And then
Oh, tens of thousands.
entrepreneur, an entrepreneur jumps on one and plays with it a little bit and then moves on to the next thing. And it's often, I think people, there's so much confusion and stuff going on in the market around all that kind of stuff that
Oh,
they just don't
absolutely.
even know where to go or where to begin or even, yeah. It's just,
So great way. And I'm glad you mentioned that. If you go to afterthelead.com, which we'll talk a little bit more, but that's a place where we have a ton of resources. One of the resources we have there, which is a free download, is we call it the Ultimate CRM Research Guide. Sounds a little maybe cheesy, but we say it that way specifically because it's not comparing any specific software. It's saying, to your point, here are the things you need to do before you even look at the shiny object. Before you go do a free demo or you sign up for a free trial of HubSpot or whatever you're doing, before you do any of that, this playbook outlines all of the critical steps, identifying the business goals, the sales goals, the marketing goals. What are the problems that you're identifying with the business? Who's going to use the technology on your team, right? What kind of reporting do you need? Who's going to train us on how to use the technology, right? And so what we find is that a lot of people are, to your point, downloading free software, trying something for free, signing up as it's only $100 a month, and like, who cares if it doesn't work? It doesn't work. But they're not going into it with a strategic plan.
yeah,
They just, it's like the kid in the candy store. Oh, Ma, that looks great. Hey, Dad, can I get that lollipop? It's so shiny and bright and colorful, but you may not even like the flavor of the lollipop. So it's not necessarily going to actually help your business if you don't know why you're actually even trying to use that tool at all. So that's a great. We'll talk more about other things we have to give away at the end of the show, but that for sure is perfectly to what you were talking about. It'll eliminate all that confusion and give you some focus.
yeah, yeah. And that's great. And once again, it's just, like everything, it's making a plan, being intentional about
Right.
everything you're doing and not just being emotional and grabbing stuff, trying to solve problems real fast.
And not getting software because your best buddy, who owns another company,
And
loves,
it's totally different
company,
than
loves,
yours.
loves Salesforce, and you go spend $80,000 on Salesforce, and you're like, what am I doing? Like, this is
Yeah.
now you're locked
Yeah.
into
It's like, I just needed to track my clients. I didn't need all that.
Yeah.
So, turn to the conversation to you a little bit more, Jason. Like, so you said you had kind of grown a business and sold that. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, the experience I had, starting that first company was the reflection I have now is that I was learning as I went. I
Mhm.
didn't know, and back then it was completely different. There's obviously way more resources today than there was 25 years ago, roughly. But I didn't know there were business coaches out there. I didn't know there were sales trainers and sales coaches. I didn't know there were all these different people that can help me figure things out a lot faster pace than it took me to
Mhm.
figure it out on my own, you know?
Yeah.
So that was like the sort of like the biggest lesson if I reflect back of like, wow. And I eventually did hire all those types of people and brought in experts to help with the business. But that wasn't until a few years later that I did that. So if I had done that in the beginning, I could have definitely fast forwarded, the success of the business quicker, right? Having all of those people that have done it before, they failed before, they've learned. And so I think that's really, kind of paramount. The other thing I will say too, just in terms of now this being my second business, as even being a marketer, I think that if you are very sort and I don't mean this in a negative way, but if you're very generic in how you describe what you do and who you can do it for, it's going to almost be virtually impossible to market yourself. And
Right.
so, even with like, the CPA work you do, Peyton, and
Mhm.
truth be told, I don't know exactly about your clients, but
Sure.
like I've met marketing agencies who say, well, we do advertising for anybody. And I felt, advertising agencies say, we only help construction companies that
Yeah.
specifically do painting, right?
Mhm.
And it's like, or we only help dentists that only do like this type of work. And when you get super narrow niched, and not to say you have to only have one niche, right? You could help contractors, you could help plumbers, you could help all these different people, but you have specific niches. It allows you to be a lot more effective in your marketing and to stand out and to have a very clear, direct message, to that audience. And so that would be, I think, another lesson too, having worked with literally hundreds of companies over the last 25 years, is the ones that really struggle and don't see results can really focus in on, who
What
they
you
want to help and
got.
how they're going to help them. And they're just like, hey, I'll work with anybody. And I
Yeah.
think the mode of working with anybody is extremely, extremely difficult to be successful. I'm not saying you can't be, but it's much, much harder.
Yeah, that's some great couple points that you there. The first one, talking about in your first business and asking for help, right? Or realizing there's other resources out there besides, you. Yeah. Same here, right? I started my business over 10 years ago, and I would say the first 6 or 7, I just basically ran everything in isolation. And, I read a lot, do a lot of podcasts and stuff like that. So I was learning information, but like, it's amazing when you actually start connecting with people and opening up and
Mhm,
realizing people as the resources, how I could build my business so much faster now. you know, when I think every entrepreneur that's had some level of success and built their business can always look back and like, man, I wasted so much time. If I knew what I know now, I can do it. And then the other point you talked about, as a marketer and niche marketing, right? Great, right? Like if, so I'm in the tax world and you just say, hey, we prep taxes for people. Okay, it's great. Like, but you're right. Like, there's nothing that differentiates you. There's nothing that makes you stand out. It's like there's nothing different between you and the 10,000 other people out there, and your messaging is exactly the same. So, like,
mhm,
why would anybody care to listen to anything you have to say, right? And that's a really bad thing in my industry. Is if you know anything about the CPA firm industry, is that everybody is generalist, right? But the vast majority of people are generalists, and they do taxes for literally anybody and everybody. And so they get all their work bottlenecked in 3 months, and they do all this work and all these different industries for all these different people. And it really just focuses on compliance work. And there's really
mhm.
no strategic, valuable work going on there other than putting numbers and papers and filing taxes. And that's been a huge development in me and my business of, man, we can do this a whole lot better and actually add strategy and advice and planning. So, but once I found that and found that messaging around tax planning, the marketing really starts to work.
Absolutely, because at the end of the day, right, anybody, out there that's selling something is solving a problem, right? Even like Amazon, right? So like Amazon's got like, gazillion products, right? Like you're like looking for something specific, like I need this, I need that, or I like this is why I need a new pair of shoes because my shoes ripped. You have a problem, you're looking for a solution, and like they need to be waterproof, they need to be whatever, right? And so product advertising is sort of like no different. And sometimes it's simple, right? Because you know exactly what you need and find something that you could find to get that solution. And I think it's really come a long way. And people now are even being so specific. Like even for example, from my business, we don't work with every CRM that's out there. Like you say, there's tens of
Mhm.
thousands of them. There's no way we could be proficient and experts in all of them. So we're really good at HubSpot. We're good at a product called SharpSpring. There's a new tool, Constant Contact, that's out there, and some, things like Klaviyo and email marketing tools. And so if you search, let's say SharpSpring consultant, we're at the top of the page, and we get a lot of leads that way because we're the only ones in the world, quite frankly, that are maybe us and two other people that are at the level we're at in terms of this one particular tool. And
Mhm.
so we're able to sort of dominate, right, that market because of we've had 15 years of experience using this tool. And so we get clients from all around the world. Now, that being said, people are smart, they're savvy, right? So you're going online and you're not searching for like, I need a painter for my house. It's like, I have like a textured ceiling and I'm looking for somebody that, has experience in creating a smooth ceiling and then right painting it, right? And then you might find like articles or blog posts or whatever on a painter's website that like shows examples and
Rides that.
testimonials about that specific
Mhm.
thing. And so, you know, that's where now with AI, it's just only going to get more
Mhm.
fortunate,
Mhm.
to
Yeah.
be able to do that.
Oh yeah, it's gonna get so much more niche and
Yeah.
more sophisticated, right? And the ability to create a blog post instantaneously with good information is,
Well,
it's kind of
you're
interesting.
already right. I mean, but I think there's still a human element where you kind of have to have your input on it. And when I talk to people about AI that really haven't used it, and they're like, "Holy cow! Like I didn't
Yeah.
like I've heard about it, but I didn't know it could do this."
Yeah.
It's like their mind just melts in front of you. You know,
Yeah. And it's amazing. I really started playing with some of those tools, I don't know, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. And yeah, first interactions with AI, you're like, oh my God. And the applications are like literally endless. But it is interesting, when I first see the tool, I'm like all excited, whatever, and looking around. And, man, it takes humanity a long time to actually start implementing tools. That is such a game changing tool. And you see businesses are really starting to invest and use AI and lots of different tools, but it still seems to take, 5 to 10 years for the the average person to be like using that stuff in their daily lives. It's kind of interesting. We found a lot of different ways to use it really in our industry, which is research. It's basically replaced Google for.
So
Yeah.
one thing I've been playing with, specifically, let's say ChatGPT, is so you need to teach it, right? You need to it needs to understand like who you are, what you're all about. And so there's a couple of things I would recommend. One is build like a persona for yourself. Like these are like my hobbies, these are my personal interests, this is my title, this is the company I work for, this is what we do. Maybe like, and then you could say like, how we're different than our competitors, or you could ask it to do that, right? And so you build this profile and you save it, right? And so it's saved in there. And then you do the exact same thing for the company, right? This is what the company is all about, right? What's interesting that I started experimenting with is I look to use neurostrategy, which is all about, neuroscience and about the way people think and sort of influencing, not only influencing their decision, but using specific words in the order of words to get them sort of take action or take notice. And so when you tell it to do those things and to use those frameworks, and I just did this the other day, which I thought was kind of interesting. We had a situation where we were about to bring on a client, and there was something that they were a little like unhappy with. So obviously, always trying to make things right. And I had a pretty well written email, but out of curiosity, I said, "Hey, ChatGPT, take what you know all about us and about me, and the neuro strategy we use that you've already saved." And I wrote the whole, maybe like a paragraph long of the situation with this particular prospective client, why they were unhappy, what we were doing to make them happy. And I said, how would you save this deal? Basically, is what I said. And I wrote back this amazing email. Like, granted, I had to tweak it, but I wrote back this amazing email, which I was like, holy cow. I was like, this is an interesting perspective. Like, I wouldn't have gone that way,
Mhm. Yeah.
as I said, these are the concerns they have. And so it addressed those concerns in the email in a very thoughtful, articulate way. And needless to say, I sent that email, and within like an hour, I said, okay, let's start to work this out. And, we got on a call and things are moving forward, you know? And so that could be something too, where people may not be thinking about that, right? We talked before about how salespeople give up or they get frustrated. Well, if you have good notes and you're paying attention and listening to people that you're talking to and trying to sell to, ChatGPT could be a good tool to help you kind of navigate, not to say you're going to use it for every communication, but
Yeah.
if you're in a pinch, it might be something at least getting some ideas from.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not going away, guys. Like your ability to be able to prompt and work with AI is going to be a major skill, especially in the near future. You better start playing with it. But, the interesting thing enough is, I've kind of built through my social media and kind of podcasting and kind of a personal brand and whatever that GPT and Perplexity and whatever, they know a lot about me. Just from all my content I put out.
Yeah.
It's amazing is if you put out enough stuff out there on the internet, ask it who's Peyton Squires, the in-depth knowledge there is pretty insane.
Yeah. And that's the thing too, just not to kind of hone in on this so we can move off the topic, but
Yeah.
people should know if they don't know, when you use a tool like ChatGPT, everything you put in there, it's all public sort of knowledge, right? Public
Mhm.
index, right? So like if you put anything proprietary about your business or about something you don't want anybody to know in the world, like don't use ChatGPT because it's going to be out there for the public consumption, So that's something that not maybe everybody knows. And I just thought it'd be important to say that.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's important piece to drop there. Yeah.
Right.
So, just turning back to you again, Jason, I guess
Sure.
the question I like to ask people is just so leadership, right?
Mhm.
You built a business, sold one, CEO of another business. Has your leadership style developed or changed? What have you kind of learned as a leader through all that?
Well, I think patience is certainly one thing. Also know that you could have the best people on your team, but they're not going to do things the way you would exactly do it. Doesn't mean they're doing it incorrectly. It's just, they have their own style of doing things. So that's something that's really important, I think, to recognize. And then also, it's about working with clear expectations. So what I mean by that is I'm the type of business owner where I'm going to get back to everybody the same day. I work 9 to 5, but if it's, something important comes through and I wasn't able to get to that email at 6 o'clock, 6:30, I'll still respond. Otherwise we'll wait till the next morning, but I'm always getting back to people. And one thing that I always stress with my team is that generally people start talking to me first before they meet the rest of the team, right? So I'm handling all the business development for Cultivize. And so I said, listen, I said, people are used to, accustomed to this reactive conversation, meaning, it's not being days where I'm getting back to them, which I can't stand when people do to me. And so tell the team, I'm like, listen, you have to get back to people the same day. It's just important because then, they think, okay, well, Jason's always getting back to me right away. Why is it taking you potentially a few days to get back to me? And so that's something that when we bring new people on, we're always telling, and we're a small team of 6 paid, so we're not like this huge company, but anytime we bring new people on, I would say, listen, we have to have clear expectations, and if you're doing other things, right, because we do work with some freelancers, that's okay. But I need to know, like, if you're going to be on vacation, you're have this big project coming up and you're not going to be available, I need to know these things so I can manage expectations with the client or with myself. And so a couple of big lessons that have come through just in working with other people for the years.
Yeah. Yeah. You talk about managing expectations, right? Like all human sadness or whatever comes from like expectations, right? You talk about expectations internally with your employees or expectations with customers, externally. We've actually started through our new sales process, a kickoff call when we bring on a new client in our kind of new planning system is that whole kickoff call is just expectation setting.
Mhm.
I mean, we're asking the clients some basic questions, but a big part of it is like, hey, we're going to do a job for you, but we need your help to be able to do that job.
Yeah.
And here's how we communicate. And here's what, like, just 100% what to expect from us and what we
Mhm.
expect from you. And that way everybody's clear, right? And it really sets a clear vision of how the relationship and partnership's supposed to.
Yeah.
And,
So,
and I think high quality people really appreciate that too.
yeah,
Um,
well, it shows you're organized too, right? And that you're not, I think it's a big, big factor is that you're a planner, right? You're not just sort of like shooting from the hip. I guess who wants to work with somebody that's going to shoot from the hip, you know?
yeah,
Yeah.
not in my industry.
Not in your industry, though.
So, one last question here for you, Jason. If you could go back and give yourself one piece of advice, when you were younger, say you're starting your first business,
Yeah.
what would that piece of advice
I think it would be well, kind of what I talked about earlier, actually, to niche, right?
be?
Niche into something specific. That first company I had was nothing niche about it at all.
Nothing
And,
unique about us
you
at all.
know, the only thing that you can say as niche is that, all of our customers are in the tri-state New York area, but that's like, that's not niche.
Yeah.
That was like the sort of the only similarity in that 90% were service-based businesses, but that's millions of companies that are potential prospects. So that would be the one thing I would have looked at because listen, I came from the agency world. So like my mentality was like, oh, like I'm doing work for all these other companies that have nothing to do with each other, completely different industries, different markets, different verticals. And so like my mentality was, okay, I'm going to build my little boutique company the same way the agency model works. I'll do everything for everybody, because that's what the agencies do. And so that would be the one thing I would certainly change.
Yeah. Yeah. Like you said, that's great advice. And I think what keeps people from doing stuff like that is really just like scarcity, right? Scarcity mindset. You're afraid to, when you're starting out, right? Like you're just trying to make money. You're afraid to
Mhm.
tell anybody no about anything.
Yeah.
You're not clear of what you're even doing or what you want to do, right? And so you end up in all kinds of projects and stuff that probably, you're beating your head against the wall or they're not, some of them maybe even turn out not to be profitable because it's like not even like you had to figure out how to do all this stuff because it's
Right.
not wheelhouse, right? And most importantly, it's like when you niche down and get really good at, this one specific thing, you can add a ton of value to the right customer, right? If you can find that right customer, you can add, 10x the value because you are so good and efficient at solving this one problem. And you can charge 10 times more or whatever, as instead of being this person that solves the same problem everybody else solves, and it's
Mhm.
not that valuable problem to solve.
And think about it even like wherever you're living and listening, the local restaurants in your neighborhood, you probably remember the ones that are specific. Hey, they have amazing dumplings at this place. They have like 10
Yeah,
things on the menu, but the food's amazing versus like the diner that's got 1,000 items and the food's just okay, right? And it's not as memorable. And so,
yeah, yeah. Yeah, like a restaurant that has its one item, like, oh, that's the wings place, or
right.
that brings in all the business, right?
Exactly. And that's what they're known for. And quite frankly, I personally don't like going to restaurants that have a huge menu because to me, it's like, okay, they don't ever found their niche of what they're really good at, So I'd much rather go to even a specific cuisine. Like I'll go into, not that I go to these places, but always like strikes me as weird is like you go into an Italian restaurant, but then they have like cheeseburgers on the menu. It's like, wait a second,
For
what?
like,
Yeah, right. Like, okay, fine, it's on the kids menu, but it shouldn't be on the adult menu,
sure.
Like we're like Mexican food at an Italian restaurant. You're like, what's going on?
Right. And I, weirdly enough, I evaluate businesses and stuff like, when I walk into them and kind of in my head and like, yeah, same thing. Same thing. When I walk into a restaurant, it has a ton of stuff on the menu. I'm like, there's no way this place is like profitable. There's just no way. It's like, you can't do all this. Like you think from an inventory standpoint, like and restaurants, one of the toughest businesses to be in to even
Oh,
begin
of
to make
course.
money.
And not only that, but you got to start questioning like, how's the quality of the food? And like, they have to have so many things on the menu. Like, it's not that busy, especially. It's like,
Yeah, then
oh,
there's like all that stuff set in the freezer.
right.
Jason, man, this has been an amazing conversation. What's the best way people can kind of connect with you, get to know more about you?
Yeah. So I'm on social media. You can find me there, Jason Kramer. But the easiest way is to go to afterthelead.com. That's after the lead. All my socials there. You can get in touch with me. Like I said, we have tons of resources. Another thing we didn't really talk about, I just built a new tool called Profit Path, which is on that landing page as well after the lead. Profit Path is to help these really smaller sort of startup businesses get on the right track. So it's a interconnected Google Sheets to keep track of your leads, your contacts, your sales pipeline. It's got some really cool reporting in there. And then for your audience, Peyton, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to give them, it's only $200. It's like a lifetime, thing. There's no subscription. There's no monthly fee, no annual fee. And with it comes coaching from me personally. So for a year, you're going to get free coaching every month on actually how to not only use this tool, but also the things we're talking about today, like giving my advice about just business in general, about marketing, high level, all these things. If you're your audience, I'm going to create a coupon code. You can use BTS. So it's BTS to save $50. So for $150, you're going to get a tool that's took me several months to build. That's pretty complicated in terms of the way it's built, but it's super, super easy. Takes 5 minutes to set up and 10 minutes to start using, if that. Put everything in there. So afterthelead.com is where I find me and all those great resources.
That's awesome, Jason. Appreciate it. Listeners, definitely check that out. CRM system there. It sounds like he's got some pretty cool tools and coaching, right, coming out of it. So if you need some marketing help, definitely check out Jason at afterthelead.com.
Thanks,
Jason. Anything else you want to leave the listeners?
To say, wherever you are, whatever time you're listening, enjoy the rest of your day. Keep positive and try to be practical in the way you're trying to niche your business. I think that's something that I think we both agree on can be a huge pivotal change. Yes, it's scary, but if it's done with focus, it can really be a very pivotal to changing things in a very positive way.
Yep, absolutely. Listeners, we'll catch you next time. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. If you found it valuable, please rate, review, and share it. That is the best way to help us build this and reach more people, as we're trying to accomplish our goal of help creating more healthy, wealthy, and wise entrepreneurs. You can follow us on social media by searching for me, Peyton Squires, or going to PeytonSquires.com. On the website and social media, we're always sharing tips of personal growth, and there we can actually interact. I'm looking forward to it. Thanks, guys.